Hi, you guys. I just had a great conversation with a man named Ahmed Darwish. So when I learned about him and his work, it really stopped me in my tracks. He's the visionary behind the Living Organism Project. This is a project that's rooted in healing, growth, and transformation. He has deep wisdom that he's learned through his personal journey and also through his experience pivoting from being a law school student to a psychology major. Eventually, he and his wife opened up a clinic, and they helped guide individuals, leaders, and organizations through really complex human experiences of grief, shame, ego, and purpose. So let's dive in, and thanks for being here. Welcome, Ahmed, to Owning Your Legacy. Thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to dive in and learn more about you, more about your book. But before we get going there, talk just a little bit about what got you here.
First, thank you for inviting me and being so hospitable. So sort of the beginnings start with, an initial inspiration to share as much as I can share to help make this world better. So in doing that, I initially pursued law school, thinking that might be one route, but it really wasn't the most authentic route for me.
Didn't resonate with you?
No. So halfway through, I was like, I'm miserable. So then I went to graduate school for clinical psychology, and then from there pursued that for about 30 years. And then
had your own
retired.
practice, right?
Yeah, my wife and I built a clinic, and we did a variety of types of services, primarily adults and children and adolescent psychotherapy, but we also did consulting with schools and with businesses around diversity issues, inclusion issues. And then with businesses, it was more navigating the relationships that, to facilitate the best.
Relationships within the business.
Particularly amongst the executive teams, where you had different interests, especially when there's founder energy combined with the evolution of the growth of a company.
So how do you help that transition?
Ultimately, what I found was that it came down to a founder being willing to let go and just
easier said than done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you know, you've put everything into it, and letting go.
It's always your baby, right?
Yeah.
And it's similar, right, to letting your children grow up. Have to let them fall.
Yeah. And whatever ego issues there are in there, that sense of, wait a second, I built this, so why is so-and-so coming in and saying they know better and whatnot? So there tends to be a hurdle that has to be cleared, where there's a recognition of, if you want to evolve and grow, it means you have to change. And you got to change with the new configuration and what the new needs are. And the investment in it being mine has to change. And it has to become ours, kind of thing.
That's so true. That is very true. Would you say it's helpful when that transition is happening that the founder needs to find something else to love or something else to find purpose or fulfillment in? Would that help?
That would definitely help. And I think what I would add to that would be a reflection on their own personal values and truths. And just for the record, the way I define truths are those things that in your core are your truths, the things that are true for you. And then our values are the operationalization of those truths. So if I believe that all human beings are created equal, if that's a truth, then the value is I treat all people as equal.
Very cool.
So when we soul search and evaluate, well, what are my values? Is the changing culture of the corporation or company or organization, does it still match my values and my truths?
So then how did you evolve to where you are now from that step?
I guess it was right around COVID. I retired from clinical work because I had started writing a book 2016, 2015 called Ego Nation that isn't complete yet. but I'm going to burp myself and get that thing out.
It's going to be done soon.
It's going to be done.
I'm going to be bugging you.
Yeah.
And you can bug me. How's your book? Sometimes
that.
you need a nudge.
And so in that book, it was an attempt to share everything that I have to offer as a clinician, as a person who's lived in this world, and as somebody who believes in a growth-based model of living as opposed to a shame-based model. It led to wanting to retire from clinical work and share everything that I have to share that would facilitate healing in this world. So from that, what first happened was I had a dream. And in that dream, I was awakened about 3:30 in the morning, and I was compelled to go write it out. Yeah. So I wrote it out, and then when my wife woke up in the morning, I said to her, I got to read this to you. And I read it to her, and she just started crying. And she said, you have to put this on a video, and you have to put this in the world. So that prompted, so I followed her instructions. And after I did that, that led to starting a YouTube channel throughout COVID. And the objective was to lay out different things that I've been writing about in a format that hopefully people would watch. I never used my name intentionally, never gave my credentials intentionally, because I wanted people to listen and feel and decide, does this speak to me? Mm-hmm. And the wish was that people would feel that it speaks to them, and it would inspire them to pursue their dreams, their best lives, and to cope with a lot of what was going on during COVID.
So what was the dream? Like, can you describe it?
On the website, there's a video, an intro video, and it essentially captures, it's actually the very first video on the YouTube series, and then it's basically the video, the intro video for the organization that I started out of it called the Living Organism Project. And I like the story about how that name came about, because it was more the idea of, if you want to have a society that's rooted in growth and expansion and evolution, then it has to be living, and a living thing tends to be an organism. And when you put that together, now you have a project. So that's where the name came from.
And then is the goal to get people to kind of join you, or take on the challenges you might give them?
Well, there's multiple components. One component is what I call a self-leadership coaching model that I developed that has 7 different elements that are like the equivalent of a 360 evaluation. And in those elements, we're looking at people's truths, their values, obstacles to being in alignment with their truths and values, themes, beliefs, things that people are mourning or grieving, and then psychological defenses. And I can't remember if I mentioned beliefs, but beliefs is another category.
How do you get people to find their truths?
Well, a couple of ways. One of the techniques that we would use would be writing a narrative. So there are 3 areas that we would primarily have people focus on in order to get the data. And this is where, in getting the data, is where I would describe it as employing sort of the Socratic method from law school, so that came back into my consciousness and my approach, where we'd have people write a narrative, for example, on when in their lives they experience joy. And the reason for that is that when we start to lose touch with our emotions, there are many that believe that the first emotion that we lose is joy.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, it is. And joy requires us to be present in order to experience. So that then implicates how present we are, which is another huge thing that defines our authenticity, our well-being, and just our overall fulfillment in life. So somebody would write a narrative on that and then just go through one line at a time, and oftentimes not even get through the whole narrative, in order to demonstrate how much we can see that we take for granted that we can't. You don't have to see everything all at once, but we can train ourselves to see what's right for us to see in that moment.
And then how do you get to themes of your life?
Well, that's a good question. Some of it would be, again, through taking apart those narratives. So while taking apart those narratives, we're categorizing things that fit into the different categories. So with themes, one of the narrative categories that I believe captures themes best is the category of shame.
Brene Brown, I'm sure you eat her up too, because she talks so much about that. It's so important, and especially in parenting. So easy to go there.
Yeah. In thinking about that, then that's where we develop the themes that show what are the things that cause people to kick up their defenses.
Because when you feel shame, then you defend.
Exactly. And defenses are, the technical term is that they're the defenses of the ego, right? So it's our ego that gets us into trouble. Let me back up. Ego's not a bad word.
Right.
Ego is a developmental word ultimately, because the way I would put it is, if you were to ask me why we're here, I would say one of the reasons is to learn how to go from spirit to ego back to spirit.
Ooh.
The spirit is what we come into the world with, right? We're a ball of spirit. And then roughly around the age of 5 or 6, the ego starts to develop. And the ego develops in relation to others. The spirit develops in relation to our truth through the vertical, which is the universe.
Collective unconscious, the whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So talk about your version of authentic life, like living an authentic life.
Authenticity has the highest vibration. That's what gurus talk about, that it has a higher vibration than love, than empathy. It's the highest level we can reach. And the way we reach our highest level of authenticity, one of the ways, I should say, is through alignment between our actions and our values and our truths.
Yes.
In that process of living in alignment requires us to be self-reflective and to be in connection with our bodies and our whole being, which means we are reinforcing the power of being present with presence. And the definition of being present with presence is that in any moment that we're present, our presence is our whole history that joins us in that moment, and then being present is the openness to experience and incorporate anything that we may discover in that moment and beyond, that facilitates us becoming our most authentic self.
I would love it if you could give advice to our listeners of how to check in with yourself and know when you're not living your most authentic life.
Well, I would say that a very concrete, accessible tool that we could use throughout the day, every day, is what I call the PBRC: pause, breathe, reflect, and connect to your body. Just that act alone forces you to be in the moment you're in, and it starts to teach you how to feel what it feels like in any situation that you're in. So let's say you're in a situation and you feel, this just doesn't feel right to me. Now you have data that tells you about that situation. Then let's say you're in another situation and that one just feels perfect because you pause, you breathe, and you're like, this is exactly right for me. So now you're building a reservoir of data that allows you to compare what guides you and directs you down the path of your personal authenticity versus what just is not you.
Pause, breathe, reflect, connect. So sometimes, I totally agree with all of that, but sometimes we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zones. So how do we know that we're just being pushed out of our comfort zone versus not living our authentic life? You know what I mean? Some things are uncomfortable where you might go, this is uncomfortable, but it might be good for us, you know?
That's a good question. So if we kind of reflect on that, are we saying that authenticity is comfort? For some, authenticity might be I face certain challenges that feel uncomfortable. And the reason why I never faced them before was because I was afraid. I was afraid of the consequences. I was afraid of public shaming.
Yeah, you might not go down a path because you feel it's uncomfortable and, oh, this isn't authentically me if it's uncomfortable, but that's not right. So that's deep. Talk a little bit about the individual. I want to hear about that. I think that's a really cool concept.
So the backdrop for that is that I'm a believer that we're in a transformative transition period right now, from the old world to the new world.
I'd say there's something going on.
Absolutely. And in that process, when things are transitioning, different things the light starts to shine on different things where you realize certain things are no longer needed if you're transitioning to a new world. And in this new world, I believe that we're moving from the old world focus on individualism and being individualistic, where the motion is like this, taking in for ourselves. And the transition is moving to a world of individuality, where the motion is like this. It's a motion of sharing. Giving of ourselves. One of the more selfish things that I believe we can do is not share with the world who we truly are. Because if each of us shares who we truly are with the world, that's one of the ways where we create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And if you think about our evolution, there are certain emotions that function more in the realm of survival. Yeah. If we move to a world, well, I'll say when we move to a new world that says that there's room for every single one of us to shine and to be our best, and none of us, to the degree possible, or most of us, won't interfere with somebody else doing the same. Could you imagine that world?
This divisive nature that's going on in our world right now must be hurtful. It's killing me. I think we're very similar in this, unity and letting people be who they are. And so talk a little bit about that, of what are some of your strategies to cope?
Well, so this is where, part of the framework of the Living Organism Project is to adhere to a philosophy that says, let's move psychology out of the therapy office and let's move it into the world, into society. That's also what Ego Nation is about. It's about recognizing that psychology can teach us how we can relate to each other as a society, because after all, the external world is an outpicturing of our internal world. So our societal external world is the outpicturing of our collective internal world. So when we're able to, to imagine what world we want to create, and we see what's stopping us, and we look at the divisiveness that's happening, one of the first elements of psychology that I think about are the psychological defenses. When something's changing, our defenses kick up. So the primary defenses that we use societally right now, I would say, are denial, dissociation, and the big thing that I think we're seeing is regression. Like when we look at our kids when they're growing up, typically when an infant or a child is moving from one developmental stage to another, typically there's regression backwards before the launch forwards.
Interesting.
So I believe that that's what we're in right now. The writing's already on the wall. We are moving to a better world. Better, as I define, the way I define is we treat all people are created equal and deserve an equal opportunity to be and become their truest, best selves, and we are mandated to live in harmony with the larger universe. And that's where we're going.
In my little pocket of the world called Edlong, I mean, that's exactly what I try to create as a culture. It's the fact that we make flavors is really not the important thing. It's that we have a platform and a community and an environment to do, where people can shine. That's what lights me up. But I only have this many people to do. But I think that's huge.
And how do you find that? Like, where do you find that it slips up?
One place I'd say, and even speaking of myself, it's when you're on the wrong seat of the bus, when you're not in your own genius zone. So just recently hiring a president, which has allowed me to be more the visionary and do things like this and relationships with customers and not necessarily the day-to-day. So that wasn't me being my best authentic self, I think, and trying to help people figure out where their genius zone is and what they're awesome at and teach them and how to delegate some of the stuff that they're not great at. That'd be, that's when we're all systems on go, kind of.
And do you find resistance?
I don't know, not really. I mean, I think once people find that their secret sauce and their space that they really shine in, I think they love it, I'd say.
Oh, good.
So I want to hear a little bit about the whale concept. So what's the whale metaphor?
Well, the whale metaphor is that just a way of having a picture. So when you watch like a blue whale, I think a blue whale is the largest whale species out there. And when you watch it jump out of the water and then go back under, it's being its biggest, best self. And it's not interfering with others.
With the other whales.
With the other
They don't
whales.
care. They're like,
No.
yeah, you go.
Yeah. And that sort of reflects what it means to share your individuality. Be as big as you possibly can be without interfering with somebody else doing the same. And I think that aside from the wonderful features of whales, I think as a metaphor, it helps generate images, because I think in order to imagine, you have to be able to have pictures that surface.
I think that's so true. It's like not trying to be small and not take up space. Like, what better metaphor than a whale that's just taking up all the space at once. So back to kind of the regression before growth. I think of a kid going off to college. My mom used to always say that too. Like, they have to be assholes. So you want them to go to college and they like regress. But I think that's very interesting. And I know you had talked about a client that you had in the 2016, I guess, right? Or when Trump won back then. And just your feeling of the era of women. Like, talk about what you're seeing in that. I think it kind of ties into that.
The language of men and women, I think, the language that I actually prefer to use, but you get more reactivity to, is the language of masculinity and femininity. Okay. And I believe that what happened during the Trump first election, I had lots of clients that were women who felt just total despair and fear about what we got now. To me, it was clear that what's necessary to heal what was set in motion was the need to recognize the healing power of feminine energy. We all have masculine and feminine energy, but because feminine energy is associated with women, it got clumped in with the oppression of women, which means we don't just oppress women. It means men also are oppressing parts of themselves.
Very deep point.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you become your best if you're operating at 50% or 25%? Yeah. I don't think you do.
I don't think so either. And I mentioned to you, my mom was a Jungian analyst and always talked about the tension of opposites. And that's where true, beautiful things happen. Yin and yang, masculine, feminine. And she would say, like years ago, many, about the lines are getting closer, that like almost androgyny, and that, and you know, the roles, men and women's roles were getting closer and closer, but she would talk about it in a good way, in a positive way.
So there's this expression that I like to use. The expression is, God does not choose the qualified. God qualifies the chosen. And we are all chosen for something. And our qualifying moments are the challenges that we face in life. Now, if we couple that with what you just shared, the idea of yin and yang, right? The idea of good and bad, they all go together. So in our challenging moments, when we recognize that what follows darkness is light, that's part of what can give us that hope in times of despair, is to recognize around the corner, anytime it's dark, the light is lurking. And most of us have had the experience of, if you're in a dark room, if you crack the door and there's light outside that room, that little crack will illuminate the whole room. Mm-hmm. So the power of light is exponential if we allow ourselves to tap it.
And don't be afraid of it.
Exactly.
So is that the hope of your book? Like, talk about that a little bit, of the hope of your book. So once it's birthed and it's out in the world, what would success look like?
Well, I don't know. I may end up doing everything before it gets out.
I hear this from a lot of authors. This is somehow how it goes.
Yeah. I think, well, on a personal level, it's important to me because I'm a believer. If I say that I'm going to do something, I have to do it. So now it's that kind of issue. But I think the book, along with the Living Organism Project, the efforts are to facilitate healing and closing the divide that exists within us and between us. And that comes, so it's actually being implemented now. A lot of the practices, the self-leadership coaching for individuals, for organizations, and for communities. We have a global healing project where our first project is in Haiti, and we're looking at possibly starting a project in Oakland, California. And the concept is, I call it thread the needle diplomacy, where you are bringing individuals together who share in a vision of healing some part of the world, a community, a city, whatever. And instead of, the thread the needle part is, instead of relying on government, or instead of relying on NGOs and nonprofits, you're relying on the authenticity of individuals with different levels of expertise coming together and partnering with the local community to create the community that community wants. So that's a way of taking the notion, I don't think I said it, but the Living Organism Project concept, the premise was the idea that if one person, one place on Earth, one moment in time can make a choice that leads to the spread of a virus, then why can't one person, one moment in time, one place on Earth, make choices that lead to the spread of hope and possibility? So that's why the community is planting that seed there too. We're forming connections rather than relationships. And I say that because I think when we are over sticky with each other, a lot of times our authenticity starts to fade. So if we learn how to create healthy connections and preserve our authenticity, I preserve mine, you preserve yours, and we get to share in the cumulative benefit of both being as authentic as we can be.
I would love you to talk about your vision of, like, the United States in a melting pot.
So when I was growing up in school, we learned about the melting pot. And that's what we called the United States. It was a melting pot.
Yes.
And unfortunately, and I think we see this now, where the melting pot seems to be filled with oil and water. It's even more pronounced now, where you see, the way I see it is, we have one party that wants to take us back to the 1950s and another party that wants to take us back to the 1960s. But what we need open our eyes to is this is 2025, and a melting pot can't be separate but coexisting. A melting pot, I like to use the metaphor of brown sugar and butter
Yeah,
because it also gives a visual, right? It gives the visual of caramel.
it's beautiful.
And there are projections out there that say when our species fully evolves, most of us, most of the world is going to look like Puerto Rico. Think about what that requires us to be able to do. It means our value can't be so rooted in our ego that we have to only see people that look like us in order to feel like we belong. We have to be able to recognize that difference is also togetherness.
So, what is the legacy that you'd like to leave behind?
I would say to inspire others to be inspired, to be and become their most authentic self. Number two would be to keep pursuing my authentic self because the job is never done. Number three, to live a growth-based lifestyle. And number four, to do and share absolutely everything I can share that would help facilitate healing the divide that exists between us and within us.
Talk a little bit, dive a little more into the growth one. You know, what does that look like to you?
Well, a growth-based model says that every experience we have fits into a growth opportunity. Either a success becomes confirmation of this is the right path for me, or the falling down gives me the opportunity to get back up so I can become taller and move further on my path of who I'm supposed to be. In contrast to a shame-based model that says your greatest value is the day you were born. And every day after that, you are imperfect, and your imperfections become reason for us to shame you and to say you're not good enough. You've already lost your value, and we can cancel you out. We can remove you from our view.
Dehumanize you.
All that. So the growth-based model is a model that says everything is beautiful. You know, like that expression, it's all good. It truly is all good if we live from a growth-based mindset.
So, where can people find you?
Website, thelivingorganismproject.org. There's a sign up for a newsletter or just reach out to me.
Do you take clients?
I do. I'm also training some new coaches.
Do you still do any of the corporate work?
I like to do the corporate work when I get to work with those that make the decisions, especially because that's where you get the biggest bang.
Right.
But then encourage the opportunity to explore the authenticity of the organization as a whole while balancing that with the bottom line and how that's always there as an issue. But how could it be done in a way in which we get to be our best and our most aligned?
I would believe if you do it right, the bottom line should happen.
I agree 100%. I think that's a no-brainer, but you got to convince a lot of people otherwise.
Very true. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think we're aligned on so much stuff. It's really, but you say it very eloquently.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I love chatting with you, and let's do it again.
Thanks for joining us, and be sure to subscribe for more real conversations about purpose, leadership, and the legacies we're all building.